Hey buds, it's Cheshire Wolf, and today we're playing Schastye. I think that's pronounced Schastye. This is a game that's like a weird little, like a Lovecraftian walking simulator-ish game about being a writer. I don't know much, I just got it because it was 49 cents, and I thought I'd check it out, so let's get into it. I'm loving the little retro computer aesthetic. That's a very good little style to it, you know? Okay. I'm in my room. I don't know what language that is because I'm stupid. So let's shut that off. Oh, I got a little smoky... What is that, a mushroom? Is that a mushroom? Or a little guy? I don't know. I don't know who that is. Oh, that's John Lennon, isn't it? That looks... I could be totally wrong, but that looks like John Lennon. Continue the story. Restart. Exit. Oh. I got the good ending achievement for exiting the game. Wait, what? Okay, let me get back into this. Okay, restarted my computer. Let's continue the story. Oh, okay. I'm just like typing whatever on the keyboard. It's 25th April 2004. My name is Ivan Alexandrovich Yatow. I work as a car mechanic in the Russian town of, I'm gonna pronounce this wrong, Nizhnevartovsk, which, well, in my free time I enjoy coding and literature. I've been married for 6 years. However, 4 years ago I had to part ways with my spouse. It didn't happen earlier due to the 2 kids we had. Do you know what a quine is? Sorry if my typing is very loud, by the way. I'm just kind of having to slam on my keyboard. A quine is a computer program that outputs its own code. Perhaps a more romantic person than I would compare it to a self-fulfilling prophecy. The divorce with Anna Matveyevna Yatow has not made my life easier. The most difficult part of it all was not being able to see my sons, Misha and Andrei Yatow. At first, their mother would try to hinder our meetings in any way she could. Then she took them and moved to Neftejugansk, severing our contacts completely. Being left by myself, I succumbed to the solace for which my nation is so victorious among the educated world, vodka. My actions were caused additionally by a series of cuts in my place of work that resulted in me losing my job. Spending all of the remaining savings on alcohol, I had to move in with my mother, for I was not able to pay the rent. It's curious how similarly your brain reacts to some neural stimuli. It's proven now that most of the lingual formations invoke identically neural responses in the brain of most people. Therefore, the reading of this text, for example, will induce the same neural reaction to almost any human reader. Is this some sort of weird... Where is this going? Where is this going? Is this just like this dude with his sad life and divorce? Where is this going? Living on the ground floor. My poor elderly mom hardly left the apartment while I started my morning with a bottle of Talca on the bench in front of our building. The company was rather motley. It consisted of squalid academicians, Afghan veterans unable to find themselves in civil life, Turkmen janitors, and silent sinewy laborers who would spend their daytime at job sites, occasionally beat their wives, and drink heavily in the evenings. Okay, this is a little dark. The latter looked as though they were born through condensation on the grey concrete walls of this town, being the literal extension of it. One person stood out among them. His name was Fedor Ivanovich Ribkin. I'm not exactly sure how he ended up in our company. Fedor Stepanovich has a stable job, engineer at Tarkovsky Ltd., 2-room apartment at the Lenin Street, and, as I have learned later, a small home library. In drinking, he never acted aggressively, never cried and complained. As a rule, his eyes gained some sort of a spark, and from a puny bald man, he would transform into a charismatic, almost inspiring figure. Where is this going? I want to know that the payoff of this is worth me typing away at my keyboard, which is already starting to hurt my fingers, and talking about, like, sad Russian people with their sad Russian life. I want to know if there's a payoff for this. I got to know him better last winter. In the evenings, our company would roam about in the neighborhood. We would play in the porches, playgrounds, and yards of nearby apartment buildings. That evening, a janitor called Maksut and his homeless friend Vinechka were having their usual fun, singing loud songs in the yard, terrorizing bypassing teens, occasionally fighting each other. Fedor followed them quietly while I was hit by a tide of melancholy, an emotion characteristic of that period of my life. At that point, I just sat down on a frozen tire sticking out of the ground. Snow started falling, wind was howling in the pipes above. High-rises around the yard were hiding me from it. Still had a bottle with the remains of the Talca in my hand that I was gradually finishing. Snow sticking to my face has already stopped bothering me. My eyelids were heavy. It was getting harder and harder to fill my head up until I finally fell into a heavy, crepuscular dream. I was having the same usual murky visions one experiences when under the influence. White trees emanated quiet crackles, seemingly electrical in nature, surrounded me. However, somehow I knew there were sycamores. Am I, like, experiencing the same, like, sounds that he did at this point? It was hard to see anything. A wall of impenetrable darkness started at arm's length. Aside from crackles, the trees seemed to emit a different sound. It was quiet light music, so tender and strange that it became instantly clear it was not of human origin. After wandering for several minutes or maybe days, I have stumbled upon an edge of that world. A stripe of white soil simply ended with a clean border. There's only darkness ahead. As I stepped past the margin, I have begun my unnaturally slow descent. I looked up and saw the world gradually revealing its underside. There's an enormous creature sitting in an insect-like pose. It looked remotely like a monkey, had snake eyes, and was wearing some sort of a mushroom-shaped hat. Its blue monkey lips were stretched in an uncanny smile, revealing a row of enormous yellow teeth. That's weird. I woke up in an unfamiliar apartment. That wasn't a very big surprise. Suffering from a hangover, I was struggling to identify whose apartment it was. The room was hardly furnished. All it had was a bed on which I lied, a writing desk with a computer, and a colorful poster depicting John Lennon. Oh. Okay, so this, where he woke up, isn't his real apartment? Stumbling, I proceeded to the door. Bookshelves occupied most of the next room. On a little pillar in the corner stood a small wooden statue, depicted as sort of a midget with a snake-shaped... with a snake-shaped penis and a weird mushroom-like hat. Oh, was that what I thought was just the mushroom? I didn't see a dick on that thing. A saucer filled with dry sticks of incense. It was, but I can't go out of this story now. Dry sticks of incense lied before it. It emitted light smoke. I could hear the sound of something frying from the kitchen. As I went there, I saw a Fedor Ribkin wearing an old morning gown. He was frying some eggs. Something from the Beatles was playing on the radio. I awkwardly asked where the toilet was. He pointed silently. As I urinated, I felt more and more uneasy. What was that weird thing in his living room? Why did he bring me to his house? He must have known I had my keys with me. Strange explanations came to mind. Mostly homoerotic in nature. But I swept them away briefly. Not gonna give in to that gay shit. Miss me with that gay shit. Oh, God. That shouldn't be as funny as it is. But he's just like, oh, was I gay? Was I gay the night before? Maybe I was gay, I don't know. Finally, after gathering up the courage, I returned to the kitchen. Even now, my memories of everything that happened the next year are crystal clear. Fedor Stevanovich turned out to be a decent man. He told me more about his job at Tarkow, shared a story of his own divorce, and he showed me his library. Strange collection. Hip little book by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. One example of Chapayev and Void by Victor Pelovin, and a Shabby al-Azif by A. al-Hazred. Now that's a little bit of a deep cut, but I'm pretty sure that's referring to Abdul al-Hazred, who in H.P. Lovecraft wrote the book called the Necronomicon, which is almost more famous than Lovecraft himself. However, most of the space is occupied by a collection of works of some Marcel Graul. For some reason, the name felt familiar, as though I'd heard it in my childhood. Fedor Stepanovich seemed somewhat surprised after I asked about the nature of Graul's work. He was kind enough to answer. Marcel Graul was an anthropologist Africanist known for his studies of the Dogon people of West Africa. One can still acquire records of his expedition to Senegal in 1933, as well as some rather unconventional methods used by Graul during his research of the extensive and surprisingly sophisticated mythology of Dogons. After 5 volumes of his work are dedicated to a certain family of mushrooms, usually referred to as the Teth. According to Graul, in the very developed astrological culture of Dogons, this particular mushroom was known not only as a celestial projection of the star Sirius, but also as a physical embodiment of a certain nameless god. It's rather hard to make out what is the nature of the nameless god, at least from Marcel Graul's entries. Despite the numerous depictions of allegedly real dialogue that took place between the author and the nameless deity, all of them appear to be very vague, filled with unclear vocabulary and queer metaphors. Okay. Is that secretly saying that this whole game is a queer metaphor, because there was the homoerotic thing too. I'm getting my gaydar is going off the charts. Okay, beginning to understand something when I asked again about the strange figurine. Instead of answering me, Fedor Stepanovich led me to the room where I woke up initially. He sighed and opened a table drawer. There was a couple of tiny dry pale mushrooms with thin long stems. He offered me one of them. After that experience, I've almost quit drinking. With the help of an old friend, I found a new job which helped my mother and me immensely. Another thing I needed money for was the experiments that Fedor Stepanovich and I were now carrying out. We acquired the Teth mushrooms. That's what the mushrooms in the drawer were. What is that sound? This is so weird. Through Ribkin's relative, a Soviet Africanist who was sent on a scientific mission to Senegal under the order of the USSR. So this is like back in ye olden Russia days. At the time, the sale and use of mushrooms was not regulated in West Africa, so the relative was able to bring back a large souvenir of them as a souvenir. Large amount of them as a souvenir. I'm trying to read fast because like there's so much writing. This is basically just a story. It's basically just a story. It's a game. It's a story. In his turn, Marcel Grell was kind enough to describe in detail how to contact the nameless god. Of course, the figurine I saw earlier depicted that very nameless god. Why did I want to meet it so badly? I've never taken drugs in my life. Maybe I wanted to get... The atmosphere changed. Threw to somebody outside the gray-colored garbage that was the universe around. I needed to complain to someone who wasn't comprised of the same nausea-inducing substance as the world I lived in. I desired an answer. I wanted to know exactly why I've been trampling this earth for 40 years already. Fedor Stepanovich, in his turn, was led by pure scientific interest. The first phase of preparations included a series of intense meditations. For hours we would sit cross-legged, freeing our heads of endless quarrels that various inner dwellings of our minds would have had between each other. As we succeeded, it turned out that it was just these quarrels that our mind consisted of. Knots would loosen up on the ribbon that was our conscious... It's typing much faster now. Gradually become unwoven and fall down in rings until finally disappearing altogether. The rest was easy. Each of us needed to take 4 grams of the Teth mushrooms and build a means of transportation that would take us to the nameless deity. After some discussion, we've decided on TA32402 Volga because both of us were familiar with that car model. I was responsible for visualizing the hood and chassis, while Fedor Stepanovich dealt with the steering system and the car body. About 3 hours, we were painstakingly rebuilding the familiar vehicle from scratch in our minds. Sometimes the car part would turn out weird and tremble and disappear into thin air, in which case the whole process had to be repeated. Finally, a glowing automobile stood in front of us. Its windows were shining with rainbow glares, and its tires were ringing subtly like bells. Ribkin took the place behind the wheel. I sat behind him. The engine was emitting a quiet electrical crackling. We took off. The tires rustled as the walls of the room started to move according to their axes. Left and right walls were pulled behind us. The ceiling flashed with sparkles as it jerked upwards. The floor was stationary for a time until it suddenly crumbled entirely, falling out in geometric shapes. Steadily accelerating, we flew through fractal spaces. The world around was changing constantly, acquiring new shapes that grew out of one another, turning inside out. Red and orange spheres burst open as they turned into blue, infinitely long, sharp towers connected to each other by numerous thin lilac bridges that rotated in countless dimensions and unfathomably turned back into orange spheres that were now covered in an innumerable amount of copies of themselves, gyrating. Finally, the engine went silent. We were here, in the forest, when I saw in my dream. The sky was just as black, but one could see it now, a huge golden sun shining through the darkness. The nameless god with snake eyes was waiting for us in the middle of the forest. His grin was infinitely more terrifying than the figurine could convey. Fedor Stepanovich fell to his knees. I attempted to do the same, but quickly discovered I didn't have any knees, nor did I possess a body. Something strange was happening to Ribkin. His face looked just like a sound of a blue car horn, as his whole body gathered into a sort of spindle, as though readying itself for an energetic jump. The attention of the nameless god was wrapping itself around Fedor Stepanovich's head in the form of a golden glow. When it focused into an infinitely bright light, there was a loud snap, and Ribkin disappeared. My following dialogue with the nameless god is almost impossible to describe with words. It wasn't exactly a dialogue either, for it turned out that the nameless god, as well as I, as well as the forest around, the absence of a Fedor Stepanovich Ribkin in it, are no more than mere disturbances on the surface of the ribbon comprising our minds. Nothing existed but that ribbon, so it's only natural that the ribbon itself did not exist either. There is but one wish keeping me from forever deluding in the absolute knowledge of the world's essence. All I strive for now is to share with this incredibly godly blessedness, with every one human being in this universe. Then, employing the voice of Fedor Ribkin, the nameless god told me about the prophecy. The prophecy is a combination of words, the general semantic sense of which could lead any human reader, no matter the age, sex, or nationality, to get a complete and instant grasp of the essence of existence. The understanding does not come directly. All the prophecy does is activate neural chains in a specific order. As a result, the path into nothingness is built in the reader's subconsciousness. Any person who read the text would inevitably revert to their original form. To put it simply, the reader would forever disappear from this world, severing and unwinding the vines of their existence. Is this going to lead into something where it's like, it was secretly, the words were hidden in this document and I'm going to stop existing in real life? Is that what it is? As I came to my senses in the living room, I saw Fedor Stepanovich lying near me unconscious. His nose was bleeding. My head was killing me. Without losing time, I went to the room with the computer. John Lennon was still there looking at me from the poster. After swallowing another 2 of the pale mushrooms, I opened Word and started typing the prophecy. As you have probably guessed, you're reading it right now. I did guess. The nameless god had dictated me the words of the prophecy, and I will remember them forever. When I type the last word, my existence will stop, as will stop the existence of any person who read it. Farewell, Andreyusha and Misha. Farewell, Fedor Stepanovich. Where we are going, there will be no sadness, there will